Hi, and welcome to What Kind of Internet Do You Want? I'm Amy James, and in this episode, I'm speaking with Doug Petkanics. He's the co founder and CEO of Livepeer, a decentralized video infrastructure network. Doug is an experienced and successful serial founder, and he has firsthand experience of the perils of building inside the walled gardens of Web 2, which gave him great conviction and insight about what Web 3 needs to be. In this episode, we talk about the stranglehold Web 2 currently has on innovation, why he chose to build video infrastructure for Web 3, what it means to NFT a video, why AI will make cryptographic signatures essential in the near future, and much more. Doug is a super conscientious guy and has given us really helpful feedback as we've started Web3 Working Group. This was a fantastic conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. But before we start, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it. Hi, Doug. I'm so glad you could be with us today. Welcome to What Kind of Internet Do You Want?
Thanks, Amy. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you about Livepeer and about Web3 infrastructure in general. But I thought, just to kick things off, if you could just give us a brief background on who you are and what you do.
Sure thing. So my name is Doug Petkanics. I'm the founder of a project called Livepeer. It's Web3's video infrastructure. It's my third time as an entrepreneur, but first time building in the Web3 space. We've been building for over 6 years now. So I guess that makes me a veteran in this world as well. And so yeah, happy to talk about my background and talk about all things Livepeer and Web3.
Definitely. I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about you is that you have such an extensive amount of experience in Web 2 and the insight that brings you in Web 3. Was Livepeer always intended to be like a Web 3 project, or was it something you started and then kind of found out about Web 3 and brought it over?
It was from the beginning. We set out on this mission to build the world's open video infrastructure because we saw that blockchain as a technology actually created the right development environment and the right incentives for an open video streaming infrastructure to actually exist. And we had recently, in our previous company, our first startup worked out well and had a good outcome. Our second startup actually didn't work, and we got burned by building on closed proprietary kind of Web2 big tech giants. And we said, never again. We want to build on open platforms, open networks, and open software. And that led us to the Web3 space around the time that Ethereum was rising in 2016. And yeah, it eventually settled on building the video infrastructure that's underlies Web3 and enables a lot of video-centric applications. So from the beginning, decentralization, blockchain tech, open software are very core to what we've been doing here at Livepeer.
Okay, awesome. I guess I wonder what brought you into blockchain and Web3. Like, was it learning about Ethereum? Was it, just your experience? Because maybe you can tell us a little bit about the two companies that you did before, why the first one worked. Was it just like a timing thing? Because the second one, those APIs, because I've always heard those stories from people about, APIs getting shut off and it ruining their business, but they were more like lore. You're the first person I know personally who had it, really destroy a business like that. And I think it makes so much sense that would drive you into Web3. We're all here for different reasons, but that one, because of your deep technical background, makes a lot of sense that's what brought you into the space. But please tell me more.
Yeah, definitely. We can skim past the first successful startup. What's relevant is that it was a big data infrastructure startup. So we've always been building at the fringes of technology and kind of global infrastructure, and had some success because we built this local data infrastructure for querying what's going on in the world around you, what businesses are near you, what types of businesses are they, what are they selling, what's on their menus, what prices are they charging, these sorts of data points that are relevant as GPS devices were getting put into cell phones, and cell phones could actually query for things nearby them. And so, apps like Uber and Airbnb and anything that uses location became possible. and that whole series of apps needed good data and database access and everything to build on top of. So that was a successful outcome. And then fast forward to with the same core team and my same co-founder from Livepeer, actually we set out to build a startup in the kind of mobile infrastructure and mobile content and mobile media space called Wildcard, as the whole internet was shifting from desktop to mobile. And what we thought would happen on mobile was that instead of kind of using the open web, everyone would be consuming content inside of the popular applications. And what were those popular applications? They were the big social apps. They were Facebook, they were Twitter, they were Pinterest, they were even Google search results directly. Instead of linking out to web pages, you would just interact with your answers right there in the search results.
You were absolutely right about that prediction.
Yeah, so that was the frustrating thing. We were right, and we built this whole platform that could convert publishers' content into experiences within these apps, and we hooked up to their APIs to publish these native cards, interactive experiences in there. And it was going well initially, and then lo and behold, all of those platforms closed their APIs. They kind of changed the rules of the game for developers. They built relationships directly with our customers and users. They all built their own platforms instead of using kind of our open platform that plugged into all of them. And so everything that we thought would happen in the world happened, but we didn't get to be a part of it because we got rug pulled by big tech. And I didn't even mention Apple, who kind of has discretion of if you can even distribute your app, and they held our app out of the App Store for a while and everything.
Oh,
and
wow.
So yeah,
we got the whole treatment.
That's right. So we said, never again will we build, will we put our destiny in the hands of these few big tech platforms. We only want to build on open software, open networks. And as I mentioned, just around that time, as we were kind of evaluating what to do, what was next, there was this really exciting new developer platform called Ethereum. And the more we looked into it and the more we learned about it, we said, this is awesome for two main reasons. One was it was an open developer platform that let you build what you want. But the second one, which was so cool and new and innovative, was it had the right building blocks for putting economic incentives into open source software for the first time.
Yes.
In a way that lets, incentivizes people to contribute to that software, to run that software, to form networks in a way that they'll actually benefit financially from the growing usage of those networks, those who contribute to them. So that was so cool. That was a superpower. We're software engineers and developers by background. And
were you a developer during Web 1 too? Like, where is that like open source, decentralized? Like, is that something that was like kind of native to you?
Oh yeah, you would have loved my high school video game websites that I made in Web 1. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Designed.
I figured, yeah. A lot of the builders at this stage of things, I feel like we're all in that same kind of class, building since Web 1. And so when Web 3 came around, it was like this like weird sort of familiarity and like just total excitement because you got to see what went wrong and that there wasn't this way to monetize open source. And then when there was, it was just like,
yeah. In Web 2, I got rug pulled by big tech. In Web 1, I rug pulled myself by running my own server and having the only copy of my website run on my server where the hard drive crashed. And blockchain solved that too, right? They're data stores that thousands of people have the copy of your application. So you can't rug pull yourself.
Yeah, that's amazing. So before we talk in the details about Livepeer, I would just love to hear, you talk more about Web3 in general and like what you see for its future, what it means for us, just kind of opine about, Web3 and maybe Web3 infrastructure in particular, since that's clearly where your head has been since the very beginning too.
Yeah. So Web3 is a big term, right? And it means a lot of things to a lot of people. I think it's basically, I think of it as like the technology platform that basically allows a class of applications that puts control back in the hands of the users themselves, right? So I think there's a lot of things in blockchain and crypto that are interesting. Open finance is certainly super interesting. The whole concept of decentralized ledgers and decentralized databases are super interesting and powerful. When I think about you know, Web3 infrastructure and open infrastructures, some people are calling them decentralized physical infrastructure networks, or DePIN these days. I think there's a lot of reasons why they matter, but when I look at the trajectory of where the internet is going, with cloud computing, with kind of big tech monopolies and the power and the size that they have achieved, I think there's a lot of risks in where the internet is going that affect people's freedoms, affect people's ability to innovate, affect the fair playing ground to compete. And so just, what's an example of these types of concerns? It's if you look at the big video media platforms, YouTube and Twitch, right? They happen to be owned by Google and Amazon, who also happen to own the two biggest cloud computing platforms, Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services. And so imagine as a startup that's trying to innovate and do something that, I think it's not debatable that, YouTube and Twitch are great platforms, but they also cause a lot of harms to society and control the flow of information, and they deplatform people, and they determine what you get to see and don't see through your algorithms, and they monetize your data and all this stuff. Imagine you're trying to do something disruptive to them that's better for society. You're competitive to them, you're threatening to them, but your only option in terms of running an actual scalable infrastructure is to actually pay for Google Cloud or Amazon Web Services, the same companies that own those competitive platforms. And by the way, you're paying, 80, 90% of the money you make through your video platform just straight back to pay for the infrastructure. So you're literally paying your competitor, and they have control over, what quality of service you get. Can you even exist and run?
Yeah,
you get
exactly.
deplatformed? Right. I just don't think the future of the internet is in a very good place if it's all running through the same couple, Amazon US West 1 data center, right? And so Web3 offers independent infrastructures run by a competitive set of thousands of compute providers all around the world. And if any one of them disappears, no problem. If any one of them tries to turn you off or deplatform you, no problem. So this infrastructure independence is really important, but it also brings other benefits. It also brings, well, you're running on these open networks with many providers competing. They're competing for quality of service. They're also competing on cost. And so you're going to get the best possible price for infrastructure relative to, there's only 2 or 3 games in town. We've seen that they keep their prices artificially high around certain, verticals like video encoding, which we care about, for example, because
I also just want to note what you said about competing based on quality, because right now that isn't really an option, right? Like you were saying, you can go to YouTube, you can go to Twitch. Where else can you go? There's nowhere else to go that's going to maybe offer you a different quality of experience, both from the user side and from the creator side. And that's potentially one of the things that Web3 will bring us, is this a lot more options, for meeting various kind of like niches and product market fit and that kind of thing.
Definitely. It's like you can push these things down to the protocol layer in open protocols that anyone can plug into, and that opens up a flood of standardization, and then it enables competition. And yeah, the result is you'll see competing prices, competing features, competing quality of service, right? Whereas on, kind of big tech cloud platforms, you actually get locked in to a proprietary stack where it's not easy to shift or migrate, because they have their own set of services, their own APIs, and they even have artificial constraints that keep you locked in. Like, for example, they charge you to send your data out of those platforms. There's an egress tax, so that you can't even integrate with APIs that don't live in their platforms, or you have a more expensive cost. Right, and that's by design. And so again, I think the notion of open infrastructures, open technologies, give developers kind of control to move around from platform to platform, provider to provider, build the apps they want without fear of being, deplatformed. And I think those things are good for innovation and the future of the internet.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree. And just to connect it with what we were talking about earlier, the reason that it will work is because of those incentive structures that allow open source technology to actually, work at scale, right? We've had BitTorrent for I don't know how long, 15, 20 years. Like it's been a long time. And yet it's not something that has really taken over the way that we think that other Web3 technologies will because of that incentive piece. I would say, anyway, I don't want to put words in your mouth. But it also really struck me that what you were talking about with getting rug pulled by big tech with your API calls and all of that kind of stuff is kind of similar to what's happening to creators now, who kind of went all in on various platforms, right? And now they are having the terms of that deal be changed or come to find out that it's not maybe what they were hoping it was going to be once they kind of have gotten into it and really understood the mechanics of that world, or are being completely deplatformed. And so from that perspective, video makes a lot of sense as like the Web3 play that you made. But why did you guys end up doing video? Is it just you saw the need, or was it like a personal interest, or?
Yeah, a combination of the two. We had done a lot of video engineering at this previous mobile media startup, and we felt the pain both in terms of cost and kind of difficulty of delivering, live and on-demand video reliable around the world in internet on the closed proprietary platforms that existed today. So we felt the pain from a developer perspective. At the same time, so inspired by the potential for what video over the internet does for society. I think as we went through the pandemic the last few years, everyone saw how important video is to how we work, how we get entertained, how we learn and are educated, how we monetize our time. And we also saw how you were able to do that globally, regardless of location, regardless to access to traditional banking rails and these sorts of things. So it actually connects the digital economy in a really powerful way. And it's the heaviest form of media on the internet. It's over 80% of the traffic on the internet and growing, and it's the majority of where people spend their time, through work and entertainment as well. And so it just requires it's such an important and impactful medium, and it requires the majority of the infrastructure on the internet, and that infrastructure was only run by a couple telecoms and big tech companies. Web3 had no video layer at that moment. It had an early financial layer, and people were experimenting with identity and storage and whatnot, but there was no streaming layer, no media layer, no audio layer yet. And so we kind of spent 6 months determining if you could create the right protocol and incentives and security to incentivize a global open infrastructure network before we committed and dove in. But when we did, we were all in, and the last 6+ years have been a nonstop disco.
6 years is a long time in this industry, I would say.
It's gone by quick, and it feels like we still have a lot of work to
Isn't that
do.
the weirdest feeling? Like we're like sprinting flat out and treading water at the same time is sometimes how I describe it. It's just like when I look at how far the industry has come, it's so amazing. And when I look at how far it still has to go, I'm like, oh, there's still quite a ways ahead of us,
Yeah, there's no better example of that than when I look at the web3index.org website, which shows many of the leading decentralized infrastructure projects, and it shows kind of how many fees developers are paying into those networks each month in order to use that software. And in one way, I look at it and say, this is awesome. It's happening. Like people are building real things, and these dollar values have been going, up, and this is going to disrupt everything. And then another way I look at it, and you mentioned treading water, and it's like, well, great. Like, these networks earned $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 last month. That's a drop in the bucket. That's nothing compared to, a single company's AWS bill, we're not, Web3 is not at scale yet, right? We haven't had
Yes.
breakout applications that are serving millions of users that are, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars into these infrastructure networks. But we will get there.
No, you're absolutely right. The Web3 Index is a fantastic example of that, because it's like so thrilling to just see infrastructure as a category being, highlighted in that way, and to just see that it is like actually working, month over month, like the numbers are increasing, people are using these networks. It's clearly happening, but the numbers are so small relatively that it's very funny time, but it's very exciting time. So tell us about Livepeer. Give us kind of like the high level overview of what Livepeer is and how it works.
Yeah, so I mentioned Livepeer's mission is the world's open video infrastructure, but more practically, if someone is developing an app that looks like Twitch or YouTube, ideally, more Web3 innovative blockchain connected version, then they use Livepeer network to power their video streaming or video on demand uploads, right? And so, it's a developer product. It's not an application for end users. You wouldn't upload this video to Livepeer because there wouldn't be a, destination where people would go to consume it, but you might use Livepeer network to power the processing of this video, so it'd be embedded and played back off of your own website, for example.
So I could just say, like, personally, I understand this problem, because when we first built Alexandria, which was a library for different kinds of media, we had books and videos and audio and all of that kind of stuff. Somebody came along and it had just been like kind of a tight inner circle of people that were using it, who were accustomed to uploading their own media. So they knew how to do the transcoding and compression and all of the things that need to happen for it to be, to be able to go out that way. But then when it started getting into the hands of just people on Twitter, there was a pretty well-known documentary filmmaker who tried to upload his documentary and just tried to put it in right out of Final Cut. So it was just enormous and didn't work properly, right? And very few people understand. So I love listening to you talk about this kind of stuff, because you really obviously understand the details of the many different file sizes and kind of, bit rate, and I don't know all the exact terms for this, but the transcoding that needs to happen so that the video can be seen on my phone and on my computer and on my 6K television and have them all have a good experience.
That's absolutely right. That editor that tried to drop in the Final Cut Pro movie files, uploading a high definition 4K or more movie that's 10 gigabytes in size, and no one's going to be able to stream that over the internet on their phone, on their data connection. In fact, they're going to be waiting for it to buffer for 2 hours before they can even watch the first couple minutes of that movie. And so these video infrastructures do is they do a process called transcoding. They take that HD video, they convert it into 10 different videos of different formats and bit rates. And then, when you go to request that video on your mobile phone, it requests the really small video at the low bit rate that it can deliver immediately. And if you request it from your, kind of broadband connected smart TV, maybe it can get you the 4K version, or maybe not, maybe the 1080p version. And you may even see it switching between formats as you're watching. And that's all due to this, combination of encoding power and video software that's just been tuned over the last 30 years in order to, deliver video reliably without buffering and without disruption, so that you get a smooth Netflix experience, right? And what's cool about Livepeer is all that video processing is not done by, a server that I run in the, garage below this room, but it's done by thousands of node operators around the world. Anyone that has extra video encoding capacity can, put it on the Livepeer network, and they can earn money for contributing it to do that video encoding when one of our, our developers builds an app and their users are uploading video to their app. They use the Livepeer network for that processing. And so that's cool. And, like I said, it's been live for a number of years, over 4.5 years since we launched on Ethereum mainnet. We had, I think 60 plus orchestrators, that's our term for node operators, earn fees in the last month for doing this video encoding. Some of those are pools with hundreds of operators within them, so some of those fees get split up. Thousands of token holders who stake towards these node operators to provide security, and they earn a portion of this. And so it's this open marketplace where all those providers are competing to provide the service and delivering a good experience to the, some of the exciting applications that are built on top of Livepeer.
So that process that I was talking about us sort of discovering like, oh, most people aren't used to transcoding their own media. Like that's something we need to provide for them. I've noticed that a lot of the people that were, building in Web 1 and now are bringing those skills to Web 3 do have that kind of like technical depth to understand all of the different pieces, but that when building for more mainstream developers, those developers expect certain things to be sort of more plug and play. Have you found in your development work so far that like just providing the transcoding is enough, or do you feel like there's other things that you're going to need to put together to make that a tool that more developers are able to use?
Good question. You're basically could have used the answer to that, 5 years ago as we were getting started building. But what we found was we built up this transcoding network, kind of the bare bones software to access it. It was working. But in terms of like going to market and bringing on demand to use it, we found that developers needed more. They didn't just want to plug into transcoding. They wanted end-to-end live streaming. They wanted video upload and storage. They wanted content delivery, right? Now, the open software the Livepeer is built on can power some of those things. The Livepeer network can power some of those things. And some of those things you have to actually bundle together with some trade-offs in terms of centralized providers and services. And so one of the, shortcuts or kind of steps that we took was to actually create a sort of traditional API, like a Web 2 type product at livepeer.studio that any developer can sign up for. They don't need to know anything about blockchain, about crypto, about running nodes. They can just sign up with a credit card and they can begin using this API, and it will use the Livepeer network under the hood for all the transcoding and use a lot of the software. But it'll let them choose their own content delivery network or choose where they want the file stored or use a storage provider will bundle in. And so that developer gets an easy end-to-end experience and can create their Patreon type app or their YouTube type app, leveraging the Livepeer network and its cost benefits, but with the experience they're accustomed to from a Web 2 world.
That's super smart. That's a great tip, I think, for anybody building in the infrastructure space, is that those kind of tools are really needed and really helpful. And that, especially having been in the space since 2014, like there were like those like purists, that would just give you a really hard time for doing something like that. And I understand the intention or like the ethos behind that mentality. But I think that what's more important is actually making it something that lots of people can use, because it will eventually evolve to the place where it probably fully is decentralized when some of those other tools are built by other teams, or maybe the details of those tools are worked out to the point where they can be used at scale. I know there are people working on stuff that maybe isn't out there yet, but will ultimately become part of a stack. But that those tools that make it kind of like Web 2.5 are really like this important step in terms of the progression from where we are to where we hope to be.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I wish that every app built on Livepeer would be comfortable, like downloading the Livepeer node and funding it up with cryptocurrency and whatnot. But what would they have to do? They'd have to deploy, 10 of those nodes in 10 different regions around the world to be close enough to their users to ingest their video, and they'd have to monitor them and keep them running and keep them funded and stuff. And that's just like when you're one hacker trying to build the,
right.
LensTube. It's a great app on top of Livepeer and Lens protocol. It's like your first thought is not to run global open entry points to open infrastructure. It's to, hey, can I take advantage of the value props this network brings and get started quickly? And as I find growth and success, I have the exit ability. I have the option to run my own nodes instead of leveraging these gateways. And as long as you have that, you're not locked in and you have freedom and you have control. So it's important to provide that ability, even if you make it easy to get started through these common entry points.
Yeah, absolutely. What other apps are built on Livepeer that you would like to highlight?
Cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting ones. I think the category that is where most of the inspirational activity for me is what I'm calling creator to community. You might have used to call these social apps, but they're basically apps where creators are creating content and distributing it direct to their community. And in a Web3 native way, they're typically doing things like token gating who can access the content based on what, if you're part of a specific DAO or you're part of that creators community and hold their NFTs. They're experimenting with novel monetization. So, some of these apps are like Beam.xyz, which is having a lot of success in the film 3 space, focused on filmmakers distributing their content. There's event-centric apps like StreamETH is an interesting one. It was actually used to stream Ethereum's DevCon conference. I think they had all 8 stages and an archive of all the content there. So, big conferences and events can use this to have kind of a Web3 centric streaming platform. Bonfire is a cool music creator focused application for people sort of releasing concerts and music drops. The 402 is another similar one in that space. Playground is a cool kind of groups replacement. So if you have a group and you do events, or you sell tickets, or you're doing a drop of content for a group, you can use that. So you see this similar theme of creators taking control of their own communities as opposed to having them live on a YouTube and monetizing them through interesting.
So it's like a Patreon kind of idea, but more focused in terms of the niche, each one of these. But it's like
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And how are they set up in a way where I can take my community with me from place to place, or is that just dependent on each of the apps and how they built themselves?
That's totally independent of Livepeer. That is up to these applications themselves. So I think a good example of that portability is anything built on Lens protocol. I don't know if you've heard of Lens protocol. It's a social protocol. It's from the Aave team. The notion is your social follower graph lives on chain, right? And so it's who's following you, therefore, like who's part of your community or who's subscribed to you or whatever it's portable. It's in an open database. Anyone can read from it. And every front end application has access to this data. So you actually see content that lives in multiple app front ends. So the content does kind of move openly from place to place. I think it'll get interesting when you think about what's it mean to have encrypted content or access control or token gated access based on a number of factors. But again, the media themselves are NFT posts that live on chain often or are referenced from on chain. And so I mentioned the app LensTube. That's like a YouTube type application built on Lens, where Livepeer powers the video. I think it's interesting.
I just heard you talking about
the creator move. Yeah, creator bring.
Yeah, I just heard you talking about like how Livepeer is making it so that you can NFT a video. And that's really interesting because of the kind of what we were talking about before, if there needs to be all these different formats of the video. So how do you know that you have, do you want to talk more about that? Because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, so I guess there's the what's it mean to NFT a video? And then there's the question about how do you know that you are viewing the right media for the NFT if there's all these different formats? Right. So the first one, what does it mean to NFT to make for a video to be the media format behind an NFT? I think that's an area where there's an incredible amount of room for experimentation. And we haven't seen the killer video NFT formats.
It's been images.
Yet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's been images, and then the first attempts at video exist. A music video can be minted as an NFT, and that music video is the asset. And I think that's interesting. But when I say there's room for experimentation, it's what does it mean for a live stream to be, an NFT? Is it small clips of the video that you're kind of saving and minting as a series of NFTs? Okay, maybe that's interesting. What's it mean for the channel, like the live stream channel, to actually be an NFT and have an owner, and maybe whoever owns it gets to dictate like what stream is live on that channel at that destination. I think that's interesting. I think you can get into all sorts of interesting stuff with AI and generative video, and different people contributing to what video is being generated via this AI-based video stuff. So anyway, this goes down a rabbit hole, but like, what are the interesting kind of media formats when it comes to video with NFTs? Lots of room for experimentation. On the more technical side, if you need to convert video into all of these formats, how can you actually verify that the digital property that you're buying or that you're transferring is the right asset, right? And this is a lot more complicated than an image. Like, with an image, there's content addressability. This gets a little technical, but it's like all the bytes of the original image can be represented in a hash. And so when you're viewing the image, you can have confidence that you're viewing the one that is part of the NFT. And of course,
right, it's like self-verifying in that way, kind of, right? Yeah.
I was gonna say, of course, a lot of big marketplaces and stuff don't even like give you that verifiability. They just don't leverage that property, or the media is not stored on IPFS, so they're not using the content addressability, and the NFT can just show you, or the marketplace can just show you any image, and you don't know if it's the right one or not. But assuming that's solved, so in video, we have this concept of RMID, Real Media ID, and basically what it does is it basically maps on, not to the like bytes in the video itself, but a bunch of properties of the video. So with high probability, you can get confidence that the video that you're watching matches what was signed by the like original creator of the video. And then when it comes to transcoding all the different kind of bit rates and formats, if you trust the Livepeer network, and you can decide for yourself whether you do based on the economic security that the nodes are putting down when they're doing this encoding, then what you can do is you can view a series of signatures from the digital signatures from the nodes that are doing the encoding, from the broadcaster themselves, from a broadcaster attesting that this node did my encoding. And you can actually get the kind of the playlist or the list of different files that are linked to the original video, and you can follow that chain of signatures back to have confidence that what you're watching is what was intended via the original broadcaster. Some of that's research work that's still to be implemented, but it's zooming out. If you look at the transition from like Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3, following the lines of like just text to, in things like Wikipedia, to images, to in things like Flickr, to video and things like YouTube and Netflix, it is inevitable that in Web3 we're going to see this similar like light data, blockchain transaction type data, to images in the form of like NFT collectibles, to video in the form of whatever the media format innovations are. And verifiability of content is going to be a big important piece there.
A really big part of it. I mean, with the whole era of deep fakes and fake news that we're already living in, and then add AI to that, and things just get like kind of insane unless we're able to have that verifiability. And I think that it's just something I honestly haven't really thought about until I heard you talking about it, and I was like, oh wow, that's actually a huge issue. Because let's just say, like, the thing that everybody's most excited about for creators is that it gives creators the opportunity to really have a lot more control over their own distribution, over their own content. So let's say I create something and I turn it into an NFT, and I sell it in a way where like lots of people can be owners of it with me, right? How are all of them going to know that what they actually own is correct? And like, how is all of that going to happen? It's not, unless we have something like this. So that's just super exciting to think about. Is it in production for you guys yet, or is it something that you guys have on your timeline? Or
the content verifiability stuff is on the roadmap, right? That's not in production, but the like broadcaster signatures and whatnot to have confidence that this work was encoded correctly is in production.
Is part of it. Okay,
Yep.
that's very cool.
Yeah, there's a really good blog post by a venture capitalist named Fred Wilson, who's famous for blogging every day, called "Sign Everything," that came out recently, and it describes this problem really accessibly and really nicely when it comes to AI. It basically says it's inevitable that someone will be able to produce a video that looks like it's me saying whatever they want me to say, and release that out there on the internet. And how will anyone be able to know that it wasn't me, or how will I be able to prove that that wasn't actually me saying that? And the solution is, sign everything with digital signatures that you create, and unless it is signed, it shouldn't be trusted. And so I think that's a nice basis for the types of technologies we need to be building.
We made a video about this a couple of years ago, and I got one of my friends to shoot a little bit of like bikini footage, and then had my husband, Devin, comp my face onto it. We didn't know how to make deep fakes yet and do all of the training, but he was a compositor, Hollywood, before we got into this industry. And so he had to put my face on this other woman's body. He said it was the weirdest project he's ever worked on. He was like uncomfortable the whole time. There's a window behind him in our office, and he kept it closed the whole time. He didn't want anybody seeing what was going on his screen. I'll link that video for anybody that wants to check it out. But it's just like, my point in doing it was like, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but I'm trying to make the point that this is really serious, that, it makes all of us vulnerable. Right now, it's just been like celebrities who are vulnerable to these kinds of things, because the technology is in its early stages, but that not too long from now, we're all going to not be able to know what each other are saying, or not be able to know that our reputations online are going to be vulnerable, I guess is the best way to say that. And so,
and you won't even need a Hollywood compositor like Devin to do it. You'll just be able to tell the AI and your computer to do it, and anyone, it'll be so accessible that anyone can create that with no effort.
Where do you think we are in terms of the adoption cycle for Web3?
It's slow, and then it happens all at once when you're not expecting it, right? And so I think we're through a milestone where independently these Web3 infrastructures have been built out, and they've been shown to be viable, and they show to kind of live up to their initial value props, right? I still think there's a bundling or composability to them to create, more accessible developer experiences that kind of needs to happen. That'll be a big unlock. But what'll be that big all at once moment? It will probably be a little bit more application driven, where you'll actually see some killer apps that cross over to the mainstream that exist because they're taking advantage of these decentralized infrastructures and these blockchain connected primitives. So that's to say, like, they couldn't exist without these technologies. And when you see those applications begin to scale and break out, I always say, like, the next TikTok scale app will be built on blockchain connected technology, because it just represents better like creator monetization and control than the status quo. So when you see those begin to break out, that's both a boon for the adoption of the underlying infrastructure, and places high demand on the technology, will require the technology to iterate to keep up. But it also opens the floodgates to a stream of fast follow developers and innovators that are trying to build on top of the kind of the new light bulb moment that they just got to observe. It'll be like when they saw the success
App Store or something. When the mobile phone came out, it'll be like there'll be this new flood of people that are interested in working on it because of that. I can totally see that. What do you think needs to happen to get from where we are to that like moment? Is it mostly dev tooling? What do you think it is? Because it's not going to be the end users until we're hitting that moment, right? It's like
right. It's I think that this is a little bit of a cop-out, that I actually think it's like committed, visionary, product-focused entrepreneurs and product teams, right? You see a lot of really inspiring talent enter this space on the very technical engineering side, and then maybe on like the business side to support some of these picks and shovels. But what we haven't yet seen is like an incredible influx of, I guess, like product experience. Like creating a killer consumer app is pretty hard, and it requires like catching lightning in the bottle. To innovate the media formats, you have to be, great on product and design and polish and user experience, and iterate really quickly. And so, we're seeing some of these teams come together and begin to build, but it still feels early in terms of like the teams being kind of small and under resourced and needing capital and whatnot. I think as you see more kind of credible, experienced product teams realize what they can do and take advantage of this, you'll see like those killer apps be built. And yeah, what do we need to do to attract them to this space? I would think that the technical curiosity and the interest in the incentives would hopefully be enough. But so far, in the boom times, that tended to attract the very speculative financial interested crowd more so than the media and content and social focused crowd.
What do you think
the implosion of Twitter is kind of could be a catalyst moment here, because it's undergoing a lot of changes, having its moment. It's been pretty unbearable on there lately, and so I think there should be some product teams that see some opportunity to take a stab at doing something that's better for society at large than what we're seeing there right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, year over year, it just keeps heating up the opportunity here. What do you think Web2 developers need to come into Web3? Like, is there something that is it just taking a leap? Is it just curiosity? Is there something like that would make it more familiar or easier for them to go for it?
I don't think it's too big of a leap. I mean, there's going back 6.5 years ago when Eric and I started building in this space, it was tough. Like there was a lot to figure out. The tooling was not there. There was no developer platforms. You're writing dApps directly against the Ethereum blockchain and figuring out how to deploy them and whatnot. I mean, just going through the experience of spending a week writing a dApp and deploying it and writing a blog post and putting it out there somehow made us like experts in the space, to the point where people were like requesting calls with us to be like, hey, we're trying to figure out how to build a dApp. Like, we see that you've launched one. Can you like consult, or can you educate this? Like, we spent a week here and we're doing it, right? That is not today. Like, fast forward to today, and there's just so many incredible tools, incredible resources, huge welcoming communities. There's academies and boot camps and accelerators, and there's grant money available and everything for people that want to take a leap and build an app in these ecosystems. Like, every one of these ecosystems seems to have what do they call them? Ecosystem funds or whatnot, where they're literally trying to provide money to teams to experiment with and build on this space. And they're giving hackathon prizes and all sorts of things. And so I would say, like, there's not a huge barrier. Pick a weekend, join a hackathon. If you're a seasoned web developer, you'll be able to build your first Web3 connected app in a matter of hours or a weekend, and you'll be hooked.
Awesome. That's fantastic to hear. So what do you think? I think that the thing that's still scaring a lot of people is like all of the regulatory discussion that's going on, and the regulatory uncertainty, and just kind of like feeling like, well, since we don't know exactly what applies, we have to assume that everything applies, and therefore there's kind of like all this overlapping regulation. What do you think Web3 needs in terms of regulatory support, or maybe they should be avoiding getting involved in, so that we, like, what do you think? What are your thoughts about regulation?
Yeah, this is real, right? Like, I don't think regulation is stopping any, Web2 developer from playing around with the technology or building a hack or something. But if you want to build a credible, like, committed protocol or network or application, and you want to take advantage of this, huge innovation in terms of tokenization and bootstrapping incentives and shared community ownership and whatnot, like, the US has botched it in terms of not giving you clear guidance in terms of the right way to go about doing that. And therefore, it has made it very difficult for the teams that have committed, and it's probably deterred many people from experimenting with going down that path. So I think it's really important that I know that like it took the regulatory bodies like 25 years just to figure out that there should be sales tax on e-commerce when e-commerce came along and disrupted, brick and mortar, right? I don't think they're going to figure out all blockchain regulation in the snap of a finger, but they at least need to provide like a clear safe haven path for innovation with credible, companies and good actors and projects to innovate in this space within the United States and not be deterring it. Because what happens when you do that, you see everyone going offshore, and you see kind of unregulated entities with no oversight like FTX getting big and blowing up and causing way more harm, the same harm they were trying to prevent by, regulation only through enforcement and ambiguity and fighting over who has control. So please give us the guidance and the clear path as builders and technologists that we need to innovate in this space within the US, because it's sorely needed.
Yeah, I hear, completely agree. Do you think that Web3 has had its like 1995 moment yet? Where the web went big in 1995, that's like kind of the year everybody points to. Do you think Web3 has had that moment, or do you think it's still in front of us for things to...
I think it's still in front of us.
Yeah,
I think
I do too.
Any moment that we have had has been kind of fueled by a little bit of like speculative financial fervor, right? But as soon as we see, I think, like, if you scratch under the surface at NFTs and you get beyond like ape pictures selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars, there's actually like real meaningful tools in there that are better for creators and communities than what they're getting from YouTube and Spotify and whatnot today, right? And so I don't think that has been realized yet. I think it's going to take a little bit more like utility and substance and mainstream awareness of what that utility is before we have that breakout moment. I think it's still ahead of us. And yeah, excited to see that in sort of non-financial categories coming soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Well, this was a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your time. Since the name of the series is What Kind of Internet Do You Want? That is our last question. So what kind of internet do you want?
I want an open internet, accessible to all, fair to all, a backbone of a kind of a global and open economy that anyone can participate in, regardless of location or kind of jurisdiction or access to specific services. And I think that's what we're all working towards at Web3.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for building Livepeer. Really excited to see what this next year brings you.
All right. Thanks, Amy.